Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up because what just happened on CNN has the entire country talking. Ilhan Omar, she thought she could go on national television, trash the legacy of Charlie Kirk, and walk away without consequences, but instead, she ended up humiliating herself so badly that even CNN's Caitlin Collins was stunned into silence. That's right, guys. CNN, the safe place for Democrats, suddenly looked like the enemy because Omar was so extreme, so vicious, that Caitlin Collins really had no choice but to push back. Now, folks, it didn't stop there. In fact, President Donald J. Trump himself aboard Air Force One didn't just respond. He dropped the hammer. He flat out demanded that Ilhan Omar be impeached and even suggested Somalia should take her back. And as if that wasn't enough, you now have GOP firebrand Nancy Mace and even golf legend Phil Mickelson joining the chorus saying the exact same thing. Deport her. Drop a deport her in the comments down below if you want to see Ilhan Omar deported out of the United States ASAP. Send her back. America has had enough. This is a meltdown of epic proportions. In fact, a CNN disaster, a political backfire that is so severe that Omar has not only embarrassed herself again, but this also triggered a tidal wave of outrage that it's uniting conservatives, independents, and even people who are far outside of politics. So today I want to go ahead and break down this humiliation, the backlash, and of course, the biggest reason why President Trump is seizing this moment to lead. Hit the like button, subscribe, folks. All right. Let's go ahead and start with the shock factor, shall we? In the days following the tragic death of Charlie Kirk, one name shot to the very top of the headlines. Ilhan Omar. She wasn't trending for sympathy. She was trending, she wasn't even trending for respect. She was trending because of her vile comments and the shocking way that she handled herself on CNN. And here's the real kicker, guys. Even CNN's Caitlin Collins, of all people, yes, CNN's Caitlin Collins, suddenly she looked stunned, almost kind of like she didn't even recognize the guest that was sitting across from her. She pressed Omar on her remarks, asking whether she really wanted to kind of say those words in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. Even, I can't even believe I'm saying this, even Caitlin Collins checked her on that one. Now, for once, CNN wasn't just providing cover. They were forced to confront the radicalism head on. And you could kind of feel the tension through the screen on that one. Now, how did Ilhan Omar respond? Did she step back? Did she apologize? Come on, not even close. Instead, she doubled down. She flat out refused to honor Charlie Kirk's legacy. Like, she just mocked the idea of resolutions in Congress that sought to recognize him. She sneered that Charlie Kirk belonged in what she called the dustbin of history. Folks, that phrase went viral for a reason, okay? It wasn't just cold-hearted. It was calculated. Even CNN's Collins was visibly disturbed by that. Because when somebody refuses to even show some basic human decency in the aftermath of a man's death, you already know that they've crossed the line. And so that was the moment that the mask slipped. And America got a raw look at who Ilhan Omar really is. After refusing to apologize, Omar didn't just stop there. She went even darker. In fact, she used one of the most disgusting analogies that I've heard on national television. She compared Charlie Kirk to Dr. Frankenstein, suggesting that he created the very monster that killed him. Now, let that sink in, guys. She basically said his death was his own fault, that his words and his influence somehow brought about his own assassination. That just sounds incredibly sick, if you ask me. Now, conservatives everywhere, they flipped that analogy right back on her. In fact, because if anybody has been, stitching together a monster, look, it's Ilhan Omar and her progressive allies. They have been radicalizing young people, confusing them about their own identities, fueling resentment, and poisoning the culture with these all sorts of self-hatred and disdain for America. That's the monster, her monster. And yet she had the gall to pin that label on Charlie Kirk instead, a man whose only crime was defending conservative values, sharing Jesus with the world, and outrage doesn't even begin to describe it. And the best part, guys, Caitlin Collins, her face said it all. This wasn't a fiery debate. This wasn't CNN versus Fox News or something like that, guys. This was CNN's own host looking visibly uncomfortable and disturbed okay? Almost begging Omar to walk that statement back. But the reaction was so awkward that producers practically rushed to a break. I mean, Omar was so radical, so detached from reality that even Caitlin Collins, hardly a conservative champion at all in the least, ended up looking like a normal person with compassion. Think about how far gone you have to be to make CNN look reasonable. You hear what I'm saying here, guys? This is how bad that was. Now, here's a little secret. Thousands of people are already calling Chapter about Medicare. And when that many people move in the same direction, there's usually a reason for that, okay? That is why I partner with Chapter, because they're the team that most people trust with their Medicare choices. And one of our viewers, she said, I called because everyone else was talking about it, and I'm just glad that I did. Now, let me ask, are you going to stay outside the herd, or are you going to join what most people are already doing? Now, most people, they're calling the phone number right there at the bottom of your screen, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. The phone number is 909-563-8279, and tell them that your friend Ron says hello, and, wish him a very good weekend for me. So then President Donald J. Trump, he weighed in, not as a candidate, not as a outsider throwing jabs and whatnot, but as the sitting president of the United States, aboard Air Force One. President Trump did not mince words. He said Ilhan Omar should be impeached. Drop and impeach Omar down below if you think Ilhan Omar should be impeached. Trump said she was terrible. Then he went even further, suggesting that Somalia should take her back. If she got sent, that's great. If she got impeached, that's even better. Trump declared, he reminded America that Democrats impeached him twice for doing nothing. Yet Omar glorifies the assassination of Charlie Kirk and remains in Congress somehow. I mean, I don't know about you, but that contrast, it hits different. Now, Trump, he positioned her exactly where she belongs, as a dangerous, unfit figure who should not be shaping America's future. He turned her radical comments into a rallying cry for decisive action. This wasn't just about Omar anymore, guys. This was about restoring integrity to Congress and proving that America just will not tolerate leaders who spit on the very people who they claim to serve. But here's where the story really kind of takes a wild turn. I hope you guys are ready for this. So even the sports world entered the fight. Legendary golfer Phil Mickelson, hardly a political figure whatsoever, tore into Ilhan Omar over her words about Charlie Kirk. He openly said that she should be sent back to Somalia soon. Now, think about the cultural weight of that moment, right? When professional athletes, people who normally avoid politics at all costs, feel compelled to speak out, I think it signals something a whole lot bigger. This wasn't just conservatives in DC. This wasn't just Trump. It was everyday Americans, athletes, professional athletes, commentators, voters, uniting in outrage. Omar had clearly crossed the line so severe that people outside of politics couldn't even stay silent anymore. So let's talk about the political firestorm that's hitting Ilhan Omar inside Congress itself, because after her disgusting comments about Charlie Kirk, she wasn't just criticized on social media. She was formally targeted on Capitol Hill. Congresswoman Nancy Mace didn't pull any punches. She went beyond the sound bites and introduced a resolution calling for Omar to be censured and even deported. Now, that's a rare, bold move. This is one that signals just how far Omar has crossed the line. This wasn't some fringe figure firing off a tweet. This was a sitting Republican lawmaker saying Omar no longer deserves the privilege of serving in Congress. Nancy Mace, she laid it out like she always does. When a member of Congress glorifies the assassination of an American citizen, refuses to show remorse, and spits on the values of this country, there must be consequences. And so how did Omar respond? With the same arrogance that we've come to expect from her. She brushed off Nancy Mace's resolution, claimed it included no direct quotes from her. But here's the problem. Everyone has seen the video. Everyone heard her say Charlie Kirk's ideas belong in the dustbin of history. Everyone heard her invoke Frankenstein to blame Charlie Kirk for his own death. The American people don't need a resolution to prove what they saw with their own eyes. Omar, she can go ahead and whine. She can whine about wording all she wants, but the tape doesn't lie. This is why Nancy Mace's move resonated, because it tapped into what millions of Americans already feel right now. Omar is clearly a disgrace to Congress, and that's it. Then President Trump, he turned up the heat. He turned up the heat even further. At first, in fact, at an event, he tore into Democrat Representative Jasmine Crockett, calling her a low IQ person. But he didn't stop there. He tied her name directly to Ilhan Omar. So picture this, Representative Jasmine Crockett tied to Ilhan Omar, all right? Trump drew a line between these two far-left Democrats who, in his words, they don't belong in Congress. And he wasn't shy about saying it. In fact, he reminded everyone that he once sat down with Somalia's leadership and even suggested sending Omar back. And what was the Somali president's response? I don't want her. Think about that, guys. Even her own country of origin doesn't want Ilhan Omar back. That paints a very devastating picture. So if America doesn't want her and Somalia doesn't want her, where do you send this woman? Ilhan Omar, she's unwanted abroad. She's unwanted in America. She's unwanted in the very halls of power where she clings to her seat. When the president of the United States highlights that rejection, it hits harder than any campaign ad ever could. Now, President Trump wasn't mocking her. He was exposing the truth. In fact, Omar has no home. She's almost homeless herself. No loyalty and no credibility left. So now you got Nancy Mace pushing inside Congress. You got President Trump hammering the Oval Office, and even foreign leaders distancing themselves from Omar. This is a triple blow that leaves Omar politically isolated. And when you're isolated in politics, that's when the real collapse begins. So I want to go a little bit deeper here, because to really understand why Ilhan Omar's meltdown matters, you really have to look at where she came from and how she's operated ever since. So Ilhan Omar likes to present herself as a refugee, somebody who fled from a war-torn country in search of freedom and safety. Okay, so that's what she wants to project herself as, right? But the real story, it's a lot darker. You see, her family wasn't just caught up in the chaos of Somalia. They were part of the brutal ruling class, a regime that was so corrupt and oppressive that the Somali people themselves rose up and threw out the power. Like they threw them out of power. That's the truth that rarely gets told. Now, Omar didn't come here because she was some powerless victim. She came here because her family lost their grip on power. And from the moment that she set foot in America, she's been reinventing herself, rewriting her history, and using that victimhood narrative as a political weapon. That's the truth. And look what happened after she got into office. When she first arrived in Congress, Omar was reportedly $40,000 in debt. Now, that's not unusual for politicians starting out. No shame in the game. But if you fast forward just a few years, and suddenly she's allegedly worth tens of millions of dollars. Tens of millions, folks. How does that happen on a congressional salary? Think about that. The accusations write themselves. Maybe some backroom deals, misuse of campaign funds, funneling money to insiders, shady overseas ties. Everywhere you look, you see smoke. And where there's this much smoke, there's usually a fire. Her rise in wealth doesn't look like the American dream. It looks more like corruption dressed up as success. Now, here's why this matters so much right now. Because people are starting to connect the dots. Omar's history of corruption, her radical rhetoric, her disrespect for America, it all lines up. Her comments about Charlie Kirk, they weren't just cruel, they were consistent with a pattern of tearing down America while building herself up. And for the first time in a very long time, it feels like the dam is breaking, because the outrage isn't just coming from usual places. It's not just conservatives in Congress, it's Donald Trump as the sitting president making it very clear that she should be removed. It's Nancy Mace filing resolutions. It's Phil Mickelson, a sports legend, a golf legend, saying, send her back. It's people on social media, independents, moderates, even those who don't even follow politics very closely, they're all piling in. The anger is spreading like wildfire. So that's the bigger picture, folks. Ilhan Omar isn't just dealing with a political headache. No, she's facing a nationwide wave of backlash that she just can't spin her way out of. In fact, the calls for her impeachment, her expulsion, even her deportation, they're no longer fringe demands. They're mainstream. And that puts Ilhan Omar in the worst possible position. Unwanted in her homeland, unwanted in America, and even unwanted in the network that once protected her. So the question, the pressure's rising, guys. The walls are closing in on her. And the question isn't if it explodes, it's when. So let's go ahead and bring this home. Ilhan Omar, she thought CNN was going to be shielding her. She thought she could mock Charlie Kirk's death, smear his legacy, and just walk away untouchable. But the exact opposite happened. In fact, that interview was a disaster. It was a turning point. And she didn't just expose herself. She embarrassed CNN, and she gave President Trump and the American people the perfect opening to finally say what so many people have been thinking already. Enough is enough. Trump's not mincing words. He's the sitting president of the United States. And from Air Force One, he already laid it out clearly. Omar should be impeached. She should be expelled. And Somalia can take her back. He's drawing the line in the sand, contrasting her hateful rhetoric with the very values that America stands for. And when President Trump speaks with that level of clarity, it doesn't just echo through Washington, it rattles the entire system. And so look who else is standing up. I mean, you got Representative Nancy Mace hammering out resolutions to censure and deport. You got Phil Mickelson, a sports legend, throwing his voice into the mix. This is something that athletes never or almost never do. This tells you just how far the outrage has spread. This is not just a political skirmish anymore. This is a cultural rejection. It's moms and dads, athletes and veterans, young people on social media. Millions of Americans are all saying the same thing. Omar crossed the line, and she has no place leading this nation. So here's the irony, though. Her attack on Charlie Kirk, it only made him stronger. She called for his ideas to be thrown in the dustbin of history, but in death, Kirk's name is being carried higher than ever. His supporters are doubling down, his legacy is growing, and Omar's words only fueled that fire. So instead of burying his memory, she only elevated it and destroyed her own credibility in the process. So where exactly does that leave us? Well, folks, we're at the edge of something bigger. Omar is isolated, cornered, and facing a tidal wave of backlash. Congress is being pressed to act. Trump is amplifying the demand, and the American people are restless. The question is no longer whether Omar humiliated herself. That's settled. We already know that. The question is whether she can even survive what's coming next. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this story is not over, not by a long shot. In fact, the call for impeachment, deportation, and accountability, they're only getting louder. And the moment of truth is coming fast. Will Democrats protect Omar yet again? Or will the pressure from Trump, from Congress, from athletes, and from the American people finally break through? Now, one thing is certain, Ilhan Omar's CNN disaster will be remembered, and not in the way that she hoped. Like, subscribe, and share, because America is watching. History is turning, and this fight has only just begun. Hey, by the way, guys, if you're one of the real ones who really enjoy what we do here on the channel, you've got to check out the Inner Circle. This is where our true supporters get exclusive access to content that I just can't share here, completely commercial free. It's also the best way to keep this channel going strong. So if you want to be a part of something special, join us over there. Links in the description or in the pinned comment down below.